Josh! Josh! Josh, where are you? Tell me where you are!
I'm right here. Let's get it on. The Man on Padre Island by Saucy Bev. The story dates back to spring 2016. At the time, I was 29. I was young and fit with very long blonde hair, a total hippie chick that had quit her job to travel the U.S. with my ex at the time. This was pre-pandemic, before the van life, tiny home movement really took off. We left our home in the Midwest of January that year after holiday celebrations and saying goodbye to friends and family. By sometime in April or early May, we made it to southern Texas and decided to check out Padre Island National Seashore. For those of you unfamiliar with Padre Island, it's a seashore that you can drive right onto with your vehicle. My now ex and I were in a 26-foot Class C 1976 Chevy motorhome. We drove into the island at nighttime, and waking up the next morning was the most insane and phenomenal experience. The ocean was a mere 15 feet away. I mean, the visual was so breathtaking, I will never forget it. We arrived on a Thursday or Friday, and the beach was beyond packed. Another thing for people unfamiliar with Padre, it's where many Texans, high schoolers and college kids mainly, flock for spring break. Spring break was just a week prior to when we got there, or maybe still going on. Either way, it was busy and we had an awesome weekend partying away. During the weekend, we noticed that workers for the park would often drive down the beach. They are very protective of their sea turtle population there and would slowly drive by in marked vehicles a few times a day. By Monday morning, we awoke to find the entire island emptied out. I mean, we were literally the only ones both when you looked left or right. We were the only ones for what seemed like miles. It was a gorgeous morning, so I walked the dog quickly, and then came inside to sit at our pop-up dining room table to do some journaling. My ex was fast asleep on the very back couch. We were backed in with the windshield facing the ocean, so of course I took a seat looking towards this beautiful view. Maybe 15 minutes after I sat down to journal, a gray beat-up pickup truck drove by, kinda quickly heading towards the direction of the park entrance. That was the first activity I had seen in the island that morning and thought nothing of it. However, maybe 5 or 10 minutes later, the same truck came driving back past our RV. This time, much slower. The man driving the pickup was going so slow that we made eye contact for several seconds as he went back by. He also seemed to drive closer to our vehicle in order to better see inside. Alarm bells should have been ringing at this point, but I just kind of shrugged it off. I was very much in my free spirit phase and wasn't easily off-put. But this is where it really gets creepy. Obviously, this guy needed to turn back around since he was driving away from the park entrance again. I was honestly minding my own business, and I immediately put him out of my mind. But yeah, several minutes later, maybe another 10, the man came back. But this time, he pulled directly up to our RV with his truck, essentially nose to nose at a 45-degree angle, to appear as if he were giving a jump. Not far-fetched for a 70s vehicle on the beach, and he was blocking us in. It was at that point my heart dropped and I began to get scared. I screamed my ex's name immediately and he jumped up from the couch. I'll never forget how quickly he got up and how he had his arms spread across while he ducked down to see through the windshield. He was 6'5", very bearded, and I'm 100% sure the reason that the man in the gray truck sped off like a bat out of hell. It took several minutes for my heart rate to return to normal. Surprisingly, we stayed another week after that, in the same spot. The idea never entered my head that the man could bring reinforcements and come back for me or us. I was so very foolishly fearless and naive back then. Anyway, it wasn't until later that day that another fact dawned on me. When my ex and I had arrived over the weekend, we only pulled out one camping chair. That one camping chair was in plain sight next to our RV outside. Prior to this spot, we had never done that. We always got both out, but we ended up using driftwood to sit on when we had our bin fires. And so that chair being out there by itself was the nail in the coffin for me. That scary man in the gray truck absolutely thought I was a young girl all alone, and I still wonder to this day what he had in mind for me. Creepy Hunting Encounter by Dave S. I once held a hunting lease in Middle Georgia. It was an abandoned hunting camp that hadn't been used in several years. I'm not superstitious at all, but this place was legitimately spooky. It was miles down an overgrown dirt road and completely surrounded by woods. It's probably the most secluded place I've ever been. I used to hunt there by myself a lot, and there was always this weird sense that I wasn't alone out there. There was a locked gate at the front of the property, but it wasn't uncommon for us to find the front door of the cabin open, even when the door was locked. I mean, that was pretty creepy, but that's not what this story is about. One evening, I was hunting down in a small valley by a food plot that we had put lining a creek that bordered the property. From the minute I sat down, I had a weird feeling, like I wasn't in a safe place, even though I was holding a .308 with ballistic tip rounds. I didn't feel like I was the top predator out there. I didn't see any deer while I was sitting in the stand, but the forest was abuzz with activity. Birds, squirrels, and other critters singing their normal evening symphony. And then all of a sudden, silence. Everything just stopped. It felt like everything in the woods was looking right at me. It was getting dark fast, and I was extremely creeped out, so I packed up my gear and started the walk back up to the cabin. About 100 yards away, I had this feeling that something was coming up behind me. I spun around and pointed my rifle back down the path towards the food plot, and that's when I saw it. There was something standing in the middle of the path. It wasn't a person, but it didn't look like a deer or anything I'd seen before. There was hardly any light to make out real features, but it almost looked like some kind of bipedal deer or something. And it was just standing there, staring at me. I quickly made my way back to the cabin, packed up my stuff, and got out of there. I just let the lease run out. I never went back after that. Unwelcome Guest with a Sickle by Anonymous on Reddit. This happened when I was 4, so I don't remember all the minor details. But my mom does, and we kind of traced back this whole thing when I suddenly got reminded of it, because I read a similar story. I'll try my best to explain and add the bits from my mom's memory too. We used to live in a very rural area at that time. We owned a small farm. Most people in that area had their own farmland, but the houses were located about 5 miles away from the area where all the farms were. It was the time when we only had one cell phone that my father used to keep with him all the time, and we didn't have a landline in our house. There was a public telephone booth 2 blocks down that a lot of people in the neighborhood used. It was around summer, and there was this group of gypsies. They were notorious for stealing the crops and would also rob people occasionally, especially women working alone at the farms. My father had a regular job besides managing the farm, so he'd leave very early and wouldn't be back until late at night. Normally, my mom would manage the farms by herself, but since the gypsies were going around robbing people, she stopped going there for a while, and I was also very young, so she was with me. Most people in our neighborhood worked at their farms starting early in the morning and worked until evening, so our neighborhood was pretty desolate during the daytime. except a few people 3 or 4 blocks down from our house. Mom was very careful about locking the main doors and windows, so there wasn't really much to worry about. My Gramps from my mom's side was visiting us on one of these days, and he was a very tall, big guy. I was playing on the dining room table with my back facing the main entrance, and Mom was in the kitchen while Gramps was inside the guest room. And since he had just arrived, he was probably changing or freshening up. The thing was, Mom forgot to lock the main entrance after Gramps came in and had no idea about it. I was facing my mom telling her about whatever little me was doing, and she was facing the entrance. I clearly remember feeling terrified by the sudden change of expression on my mom's face. Now that I'm more aware of the wide range of emotions that a 4-year-old could be, I could tell it was a mixture of dread, shock, and pure anxiety. Mom left whatever she was doing in an instant and was now standing between me and the entrance, shouting, with a kitchen knife in her hand. As I peeked from behind her, there was a woman there, and she had a sickle in her hand. I mean, inside our house. She was standing there trying to make a conversation as if that was normal. She definitely thought that we were the only people in the house. She was wearing lots of metal jewelry and stuff, the kind gypsies wore. Mom was telling me to run to my Gramps, and I was crying, not wanting to leave her because I could probably sense the danger. It was only like 2 minutes, and my Gramps came running and yelling from the room in the far back, telling the woman to get the fuck out of our house. And she just stood there, pretending everything was normal and telling us stuff like she just wanted some water and that we had a pretty house. But she was also backing away. There was more yelling and shouting from my Gramps and my mom, and the woman finally left. My mom immediately locked the entrance, and now my Gramps was trying to calm her down as she was shaking. My mom later told me that the most scary part was she couldn't even notice the woman getting inside. I mean, I could have been seriously hurt or possibly taken hostage if she had noticed a little bit later. And the woman didn't even flinch when it was just my mom shouting at her with a fucking kitchen knife in her hand. She was not scared of my mom at all, and was most probably looking for an opportunity to take her on. My mom is a small build, and that gypsy woman was very tall, much taller than my mom. No wonder she was prepared to take her chances. Overnight Security Guard by Hunter. This happened a few weeks ago, but it still is sticking with me and is making me double-check all the locks. In September of 2024, I was working an overnight security gig. I've been a guard for 15 years, and other than getting into brawls at nightclubs, which happens more often than you think, I've had a pretty easy career, minus some contractor shit I did in Central America. On this night, it started the same way they always did. I had gotten off my first gig and went to relieve the normal night guard, who I will refer to as D. I arrived and D looked frazzled. He was an old martial arts guy that worked the apartment job for the same reason I did, half off the rent. I walked in and asked him what was up, and he said he'd encountered a guy by the gate that, quote, gave him the heebie-fucking-jeebies. He asked if I would go back to my apartment and grab my carry firearm. And I hesitantly agreed because having worked in that industry long enough, guns rarely lead to good outcomes. But D was scared green, so I agreed. I went back and grabbed not only the gun, but my dog, a 120-pound Anatolian Shepherd. I suited her up in her harness and grabbed her QD muzzle on the off chance that something would go down. I mean, I'd rather have the dog ready to go. I arrived back to D, and he was elated to get the fuck out of Dodge. Gave the dog her standard good girl chicken strip, that's a nightly ritual regardless if I okay it or not, and then he took off back to his apartment. I attached my dog's lead to my waist, and off we went on patrol. I live in Texas, and our apartments are sealed by gates that you have to have the code for. So I went and checked the first gate, and immediately came into contact with the person D was so worried about. It was 93 degrees out, but this dude was wearing a fucking trench coat with a hood. Before we even got near him, my dog started going ballistic, hackles up and in between my legs snarling like some sort of feral monstrosity. I gave her the command to chill and she did. But what bothered me was the dude didn't even flinch. I mean, most people see a dog that big barking and snarling and insist upon being no part of whatever it was the dog was protecting. In this case, me. At that point, I stepped forward and initiated contact with the guy. "Hey, buddy, how are we doing? You all right?" The man turned to face me, and at that point, I saw he was horribly disfigured. One eye missing, but sealed up from surgery. But his other eye was a brilliant blue, and there was horrible scarring on the side of his face, missing the eye. "Yes, I am fine," he responded quietly, sort of in the way a child who's trying to fix something on their own might respond. "So, do you live here? I haven't seen you around. My name is H. You new in town?" He said back, "Has anybody ever told you that you have incredible eyes?" This simple statement made my blood run ice cold. At that point, I tapped the QD on the muzzle, and it swung out of the way. "I'd like to think my mother used to tell me that, but I can't say it's something I hear often," I said. "Listen, man, you gotta get moving. If you don't live here, I can't have you standing out here." At that point, he sort of went rigid and reached in his pocket. I didn't give him the chance to do much more, and I drew my weapon at that point. "Hey man, look, you gotta leave. I'm not telling you again. I don't know where the fuck you're from, but I know it ain't from around here. Last chance, fuck off." At that point, he sort of slowly removed his hand from his pocket, and he was holding this little 35mm disposable camera. He lifted it up, snapped a photo, and then said, "Have a good evening. Your eyes are beautiful." And then off he went. About 5 minutes later, I was still shaking when the cops arrived. It turns out one of the apartments close to the gate heard the dog going nuts and heard me raise my voice to our oddball friend and called them. They told me that they would up their patrols and that they hadn't gotten any other calls about the dude. I never saw him again. A weird guy with the trench coat standing by my gate? Let's not meet ever again. Hey gang, thanks for listening to Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. 2 for Tuesday? 4 for Tuesday? Who cares? These were a little bit shorter, and I haven't done a 2 for Tuesday in a while, so what the heck, I made it a little bit longer. Hope you guys dug it. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on this channel or my podcast, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you would, please give this video a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and of course leave a comment below. I'd love to know what you think of the stories. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Follow me on social media, you know how that works. And if you'd like to take your support of the channel a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description, and consider purchasing some merchandise. Get yourself some Campfire Crew or Uncle Josh duds. A link to my TeePublic storefront is in the description. We are now into October, and you know what that means. Our annual Halloween extravaganza. If you have a true scary story related to Halloween or this time of year, send it away to Uncle Josh, truescarystories@gmail.com. Would love you to be a part of the fun. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.